Hello, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Wednesday, October 2nd, and I'm Frank Lewis, Associate Editor at Signal Cleveland, and moderator for today's forum. We are at the Happy Dog in Gordon Square for a Happy Dog Takes on Everything forum. And tonight, we are taking on the forgotten voter. Ohio is home to approximately 2 million eligible but unregistered voters, and another 700,000 registered voters who have sat out at least 3 federal election cycles, according to Innovation Ohio. Most of them are concentrated in urban counties, but neither party is making much effort to reach them. They're often inaccurately listed in the voter databases that campaigns use, and sometimes left off entirely because an algorithm assigned them a low score for voting propensity. Groups like Greater Cleveland Congregations and Cleveland Votes are tracking them down and working to re-engage them. We are fortunate to have guests from each of those organizations I just mentioned on our panel tonight. They are Kalila Worley-Billy, Senior Organizer for Greater Cleveland Congregations. GCC is an interfaith coalition that works for social justice. GCC is made up of 38 member institutions representing 40,000 residents in Cuyahoga County. Leek Gates, Senior Strategist for Cleveland Votes, a nonprofit that promotes mobilization that shifts power towards equitable civic engagement and infrastructure. And Lily Ferguson, a Communications and Research Associate at Innovation Ohio, a research and advocacy group that develops policy strategies and holds Ohio politicians accountable. Members and friends of the City Club, please join me in welcoming our guests to the Happy Dog. So I'd like to start out by outlining the problem. Lily, I learned a lot about declining voter turnout in Ohio from your organization's reports on missing voters. Can you talk about why you conducted that research and what you found?
Yeah, so Innovation Ohio decided to conduct that research because we were seeing that the overall number of registered voters in Ohio was going down over time, as well as the people who were turning out to vote. And we wanted to kind of see, why that was happening, and if there were any correlating factors. And we did find that there were several correlating factors, including voter-friendly policies. So that would be like automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, having multiple ballot boxes in counties, having multiple early voting locations in counties, and Ohio doesn't really have much of any of that. And when compared to similar battleground states, they have more of those policies and have been having a greater turnout. So it definitely raised some alarms for us. So we looked into it more.
Thanks, Leek. And I know that is a topic you're very interested in, the barriers to voting that have been instituted in Ohio. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I want to thank Lily for starting it off with naming some of the barriers. One of the barriers that was mentioned is the ballot boxes. So there's 88 counties in the state of Ohio. We are currently in Cuyahoga County. There is one ballot box that represents our entire county. It is also, I know the east side, west side divide may or may not be real, but it is located on the east side. So it's on East 30th and Euclid. And as I often mention, in a very small parking lot. And as of recently, the rules around the ways that we use the ballot box have actually shifted. So not only do we have this one ballot box, but the location is not necessarily convenient for a lot of people, which goes into another problem. But our elderly population, oftentimes people would collect absentee ballots and drop them off. With the new rule that was proposed by our Secretary of State, whoever the signatory is of the ballot has to actually drop it off. If you have someone that drops it off for you, they have to go inside and fill out an affidavit saying that they're authorized to do so. So when we think about barriers, people who do not have transportation, people who are in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, things happen, hospitals, their votes are no longer going to be able to count unless they have people willing to go inside and actually sign for it. Some other barriers is in 2023, specifically January 2023, House Bill 458 was introduced and it passed. And House Bill 458 is our expired ID law. And with that, if you have you have to have an unexpired state-issued ID, so you cannot vote with the out-of-state ID in the state of Ohio by going to early voting or by going to your polling location. This disproportionately affects our academic institutions. Ohio is home to a lot of colleges, and so if you are a college student living in the state of Ohio, but you're not from Ohio, you cannot actually go in person and vote. You have to request an absentee ballot, which is another barrier because a lot of college students, when I was 18, 20 years old, I didn't really want to take extra steps to do things. And so these are just some of the quick ways that it is kind of deterring our voter turnout.
Thanks. So one of the other issues that folks looking at voting turnout have identified are the voter lists that campaigns and parties work from to decide whom to contact. And Kalila, we've talked about this before. I know that this is a problem that GCC has encountered in your canvassing. Can you talk about that and how you've tried to address it?
Yes, I think it's really important to understand that our organization is targeting the actual low propensity, or what we like to call lapsed voters, so it's not the consistent voter. And we also are targeting low turnout neighborhoods or districts who have starting to see a decline. At one point may have been a high turnout area and started to decline. Well, one of the things that we also know about these is that it's highly transient. And so therefore the lists are bad because people have moved, and addresses change, phone numbers have changed. Anyone who is a part of this world right now understands the impact of inflation and the cost. So keeping a cell phone on, all of these type of things that impact everyday people can become a real hindrance to people working to engage voters. And so our method is that we have a consistent group, what we call neighborhood captains, who get a list of 40 to 50 households, and they're committed to it. We have a long-term commitment of doing this work for 10 years. And so they get a list and they update that list as much as they can. We tell them, do not come in thinking you get a list of 40 to 50 households and you're gonna talk to 38 households. So realistically, about 2/3 of that list is bad. So setting the expectation realistically is really important to get our leaders and to get our captains energized around the work. And we're like, if you have 1/3 conversations are able to keep that up, keep talking to that voter and keep building momentum with that voter, and they are able to track that in a better way. So this issue around that list doesn't become a hindrance to people being engaged to talk to voters, because a lot of people move and we have a lot of barriers. In some areas, if you move, it's automatic around your voting address being updated. And in some cases here, like at the DMV, you're able to have your address changed, but that's not in all cases. And so the list is bad across the board, but we cannot let that prevent us from engaging voters who are facing everyday hardships and trying to make ends meet and trying to find places and locations that they live, if we're not willing to do the work to continue to stay connected with them. And recently, this is our 3rd year doing this, and our leaders are finding that some of the people are in the same place and that people are excited to hear from them again. They oftentimes don't believe that they're still doing the work, but it's because we set the expectation that this is going to be a challenge, but it shouldn't be nothing that hinders you from actually doing it.
Okay, this question is for all of you. I'd like to hear what you hear and what the folks you work with hear from voters about why they don't vote.
All of you are looking at me. So I'm happy to start this conversation because I think it's what propelled us to, also do this work for the long term. During the pandemic, when we were really concerned, as we had already seen from years prior, voting turnout decline across Cuyahoga County. I know people talk about specific wards, but if you look at the county as a whole, it is declining, city, suburbs. And we were concerned that it was going to decline even more during the pandemic because people may not felt safe going to vote in person, standing in long lines, especially during the national election year. And when we went door to door to ask the question if they felt safe, and they said no, we asked what was the real issue behind that? And a lot of them said it's not just about safety, it's about trust. And we asked them, what is your story around trust with your voting experience? And we heard people don't come to us. This is the pandemic. They said, you all are some of the first people who have come to check to see how we feel, how we're doing. We haven't had anyone come and check in on our loved ones. There's been still violence around. We're not seeing any momentum around that. Our neighborhoods haven't changed over 20, 30 years, and these are registered voters. So these are not individuals who are not registered. These are people who acted on their right to register to vote. And so it shifted our narrative as an organization to refrain from saying voters are apathetic. What we've learned is after you get disappointed one time, you get hurt. And seeing a consistent hurt pattern led us to believe these voters it's not that they don't care, it's that they're depressed. And so all of our leaders and our neighborhood captains go into this work not just addressing the issues of voters not voting. We ask them what's the issues that will get them to change or trust our democracy again, that we can work together, and to refrain from saying voters are apathetic. No, they're depressed because there's an emotion tied to why they lost trust. It's not numbness. They feel it. They felt it when it happened, and they continue to feel it. And so when we heard that, we decided that we're going to continue to build relationships, hear the issues, create an issue agenda, along with putting that issue agenda in a voter guide, what's on the ballot, and see if we can get gains and wins around local issues, to see if we can create trust, to see if they can trust us, to work with them to continue their voting journey, to kind of heal some of that hurt they've been through.
I'm kind of going to piggyback off of GCC. I think a big part of it also too is being creative in the ways we distribute information. Flyers are great, postcards and hot cards are great, door knocking and canvassing is great, but also it's programming. And so at Cleveland Votes, we tried to do a little bit of a untraditional approach. We definitely are very much democracy forward, and we do the canvassing, we collect the signatures, we do other things, but we also try to support the community by providing resources. And so knowing that the voters are in areas we can't be everywhere doing everything all at once, we try to provide resources to the other organizations like GCC that are doing this work, through our Equitable Civic Engagement Fund. We also developed a leadership cohort called the Democracy Collective, because we ourselves realize, hey, we're leaders, and we view ourselves as leaders, but how do we empower other people who may not know that they're leaders? And so last year we were very fortunate to have 9 community members go through the cohort, graduate, and at the end they developed these activation projects that really, really helped them in their own community. And so we were able to hit pockets of the city that we hadn't historically hit. I've been in Buckeye, Woodland, we're now working in Central, which is really amazing. And another thing, which is one of my favorites, we decided we wanted to explore something called creative activism. And that is merging arts with democracy building. So me, myself, I'm jargon heavy. I know democracy building. I can talk democracy building all day. I'm not an artist. If you put a canvas in front of me and you tell me to draw, it will not look pretty. But one thing I do know is I am a teacher. And so we developed our More Than My Art project or program to help empower artists and utilize their art as a way to kind of mass market media, because people consume art, people go to art shows, people love public art, people love seeing things of that nature. And a lot of times artists are activists or artivists, as Mama Gwen might say. A lot of times they are artivists, they have the activism within them, they just don't know how to utilize it and talk to people. And so in the More Than My Art program, not only are we encouraging them to do their projects, but also teaching them. A lot of them now can name issues that they couldn't before. A lot of them now know how to fill out a voter registration card, which means they tell their friends, hey, you're hanging out at the gallery, is your voter registration up to date? And then another thing that I love to promote to you at Cleveland Votes is we believe in vote tripling. So usually, historically, on election day, you go to the polls, you catch somebody coming out, you ask them to text 3 friends. I decided that I really wanted to adopt that model and kind of expand it. Talk to 3 friends now. Talk to them before the polls open, because you never know, people might have questions. Another thing is what you see as far as the information. So thinking of a sample ballot, it can come with you. Treat voting like an open book test, because it is. You are allowed to have notes. You are allowed to have your little stickies. You're allowed to pull out your phone and Google. You don't have to just check a box or circle a box without feeling informed. And letting people know that they can feel informed and can feel empowered is really, really important in that voter turnout. We're not just trying to talk at people, but to them. And I think being in community is very, very much a different way when you're talking about voter turnout, because often they think you're trying to push things down their throat. When people tell me I don't vote, I don't necessarily just ask why. I don't necessarily try to shame them. I say, hey, why don't you vote? What deters you from voting? I actually try to talk to people. I don't just try to push issues. It's like, your vote matters, because it does. It does matter, but also listening. Because when we talk about empathy, it goes both ways. It's not just the voter, but it's also the people that are out here trying to do the work as well.
I like what you had to say about the vote tripling. And it reminded me of the idea that like we are all the most valuable voices in our own communities. We are going to be like the most influential people when talking to people about politics, right? They're gonna trust their friends more than they're gonna trust someone up in the state house probably. So it really matters for all of us to go out and talk to the people in our communities and make sure that everyone knows the voter registration deadline is next Monday, that kind of thing. And just making sure that everyone can communicate with their peers and yeah. But sorry, I also wanted to add to the voter disengagement part. A lot of Ohioans don't live in competitive districts. And that's a really big part of people, feeling depressed about voting and feeling really unexcited about voting because they feel like their vote might not make a huge difference. And gerrymandering is a really big part of that, part of the uncompetitive districts. So voting against gerrymandering might also make a difference.
Hey Lily, for the people in the crowd, can you explain what competitive districts and gerrymandering is?
Yeah. So a competitive district is a district where multiple people are running for some sort of seat in the district. So a lot of the districts in Ohio are uncompetitive because there's only one person running for that seat, and so a lot of voters are gonna say, oh, like there's really nothing to vote on in my district because there's only this one person running. And as for gerrymandering is when politicians draw lines to favor one party or another, and often it causes communities to be split up in really strange ways, and it's pretty unfair overall.
Sorry, Leek, you mentioned you were talking about the creative activism and programming, and it reminded me of something I wanted to ask Kalila. If you could talk about the campaign that GCC recently launched, led by your younger members.
Yes, and part of that, we also, we talk about voter depression. We had a group of 40 youth who are like up and coming young organizers. Well, actually not up and coming because they teach me quite a bit about my organizing. I don't know, I'm learning a lot. So youth organizers who was led by our senior organizer, Alejandra Trace, who comes out of the state of Washington. She has a youth organization there called Comunidad. And what they have been able to do with Comunidad is get involved in elections, even in school board elections, and use their youth voice to help shape campaigns. And so we wanted to model that work here in Greater Cleveland, and we got high school as well as middle school students. So we go as young as 8 to 25 to go with trusted adults to go canvassing door to door to ask voters around their voting experience. And what they also heard was the voter depression, but also there was no vote joy. Like people did not have joyful feelings around voting, and as individuals, particularly those who were getting ready to vote for the first time, they said, well, I really enjoy talking to people and going door to door and canvassing and learning about organizing and issues and talking about that, because a lot of people say that, youth, similar to, as we say, voters are apathetic, they say, oh, youth are not voting, but they're political. They're having conversations with their friends, they're having conversations with their families, they're having conversations with us, but there is no joy around voting. And so we listened and we worked as a team, and they helped us to shape a campaign called Voter Virginity. And yes, I said voter virginity, it's okay. And that campaign is around making their first time count. It's around, it's all right to be nervous. The anticipation is real. It's also for people who want to go back to a voting experience and make it feel like the first time. And so it's for that lapsed voter who want to rekindle the flame around voting. And just this notion of us laughing and talking and feeling some joy and humor around this is what our young adults are teaching us. They needed this experience. We know the trust in democracy is at an all-time low, but yet and still, we're not sharing with them around what is the joy of working collectively together to organize around power for change. And we're doing that with them. One of the billboards that you will see, they're all across Cleveland. They're digital billboards, they're static billboards, that is showing them that their voice matter. One of them is a CSU student, Fencer Demario Steele, who helped shape the campaign with us. And he is going to vote, and he's getting the students on campus on the last day of voter registration, October 7th, and they're going to have a voter virginity campaign right at CSU with registered voters, but also for those who are registered to vote, and this will be their first time voting, share stories around what they hope to get out of it and the joy they want to experience around voting. And so if we make it feel heavy, particularly with this generation, they're very keen on naming. Why would I want to join in that pain? Why would I want to join a losing team? So how can I make it where it feels like a win? How can I work with people? How can I connect? And so voter virginity and votervirginity.com, for anyone who wants to see it, is about that. It's around bringing joy around the first time, but also trying to bring back some joy into the voting experience and do it collectively. We're going to do an intergenerational event at the end of the month where we go to the polls together, and each of them, people who have voted multiple times or lapsed voters who want to have a first time experience with a young, adult voter for the first time, and going together to bring some of that joy. And so that's what it's about, because if we're going to try to battle depression, we got to bring joy. Otherwise, we're just continuing the cycle and trying to intellect our ways out of it, but not tap into the emotion that's needed to move it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, too, I think it's important because the 18 to 25-year-old demographic is not voting. Right now, they're like, I don't want to vote. Why do I want to vote? So I've been trying really, really hard to engage with the youth, figure out what the youth like, and things like that. And there's a couple quotes. So, a lot of people have been protesting joy because they're like, there is no joy in democracy. And one of the quotes is, choose your target, not your savior. And knowing that when you're going to the poll that you're making an informed decision that's not only going to impact you, but it leads into my next quote. A very wise person said this to me today, is we are planting the seeds of the fruit that we won't eat. And that's exactly what we're doing. Every time we vote and we choose the policymakers that are in control of the marginalized communities that we're looking to serve, we are planting seeds for the future. We are thinking about those kids. Speaking of kids, if you have someone that is 16 years or older, they can work the polls, which is something I learned this year and I was really excited. We also partner with high school institutions. We do work with Hawken Mastery, which is a lovely school that's in University Circle. And when I had the kids, I'm saying kids affectionately, but when I had the students in the office, they came the week of National Voter Registration Day. And when I had them then, they were like, well, we can't vote, but what can we do? And that was when I presented the idea of working in polls, but also having a conversation. It does not just start with you. It starts at home. It starts at school. It starts at the coffee shop. Not being afraid to have the hard conversations because you're afraid of what people might say. People often shy away from politics, but politics is just a fancy word for control. And at the end of the day, if you are afraid to talk to people about the political things that affect you every single day, then how are we having conversations as a community? How are we actually looking at each other and talking? And so when I do talk to the youth, I listen to them because oftentimes they don't feel heard. They feel like their voice doesn't matter because they never voted before, they never civically participated. So they're like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about what I have to say. Nobody cares that I saw this 5-video TikTok explaining why I shouldn't go to the polls. And trying to show them that we do care is a really hard job and a really hard task. So thinking about people with younger cousins and younger family members, ask them what they're looking at, ask them what they're reading, talk to them, because an uninformed voter is not a great voter. We want people to go to the polls feeling knowledgeable and feeling strong about the information they carry, but we have to get it to them. And we know that social media is a huge way that people do it. And so redirecting people to social media that actively talks about it is something I think is really important.
So this is another question for all of you, but I wanted to start with Lily because I know this is a big part of Innovation Ohio's research. What policies in effect in other states would you most like to see brought to Ohio to increase voter turnout?
I can probably rattle off like 5 or 10. Same day voter registration, automatic voter registration, The expansion of the ballot boxes, most other states don't just have one per county. It's really, really limiting and inaccessible that we only have one per county. Multiple early voting locations per county. Again, in Ohio, there's only one early voting location in each county. And again, that is very inaccessible. Less restrictive voter ID laws. Like you mentioned earlier, we, in just 2023, enacted a law that caused Ohio to have now the strictest voter ID laws in the nation, which is kind of absurd because stricter voter ID does not correlate with lessened voter fraud. That is probably the main ones that I can think of. Yeah.
I also share. I think the other thing is to talk about the things that voters are doing when it comes to policies that have put in place that they're combating. The constitutional amendment for the special election last year that legislators tried to make it, where if you wanted a ballot initiative, you had to go to all 88 counties, you had to have more, you had to have a super majority, and people are like, hold on, wait. We have a constitutional amendment here that says, why should we have to work harder than you who can get a 51%, but I have to go out and get more. So they shut that down. Reproductive rights. We saw what happened November, 2023. People said, oh, no. We have a right to, as Ohioans, because of that constitutional amendment special elections, that if we collect enough signatures, we get it on the ballot, we get to choose how we want to run, not politicians get to choose how they run us. And also in November with issue 1, we voted against gerrymander maps in 2015 and 2018, but we didn't get rid of the individuals. And so therefore, people are going to decide in November to support an issue that's saying we want a commission in place. Because once again, the policies that politicians are putting in place does not adhere to what we want. And so I think continuing to share these stories around Ohioans, we have this narrative, we're no longer a swing state, we're no longer battleground, but if we look at what the people are voting on these ballot initiatives, not just what the narrative is trying to say about Ohio, but look at what the people are changing that legislators are putting in place. And if we as Ohioans continue to honor that as a policy, as a right, as Ohioans around making changes to the lawmakers trying to make us do what they want instead of we as the people coming together, collecting signatures, getting it on a ballot and turning out and actually making real change that we want for ourselves. I think that's something we have to say more boldly and more clearly, that Ohioans are doing it. We can't just let the national narrative define who we are. We have to keep showing them who we are.
And also, they would not continuously combat us if we were not trying.
Absolutely.
And so if we were not doing something right, there would not continuously be suppression tactics introduced. They wouldn't need to suppress anything. They're trying to suppress our voice because we're using it. And so knowing that is a really great talking point too. It's like, hey, just so you know, they're trying to make people do citizenship tests like they did back then in 1965. They're trying to bring back things that happened 50 years ago. Like, hey, you have to prove your citizenship in order to vote. It did not pass. But these are things that are happening, and so knowing that they're fighting really, really hard to stop us from voting, clearly our votes matter. Clearly our votes are doing something that is right.
So this is a question for everyone here. Show of hands. Do you have a close friend or family member with whom you cannot or rarely discuss politics because you differ so much? No, about half. So I wanted to ask our panelists if they have advice for having those conversations. I know I personally avoid them sometimes, but they're important to have. Do you have advice for talking to the people you're closest to about voting?
Yeah. I'm going to put my diversity, equity, inclusion consultant hat on. And whenever I would enter a DEI session, I would always say, hey, y'all, I am in here not to change your mind, but I'm in here to present facts. I keep my conversations fact-based, not opinion-based. If you want to have a conversation, facts matter, stats matter, numbers are not mine. People like to manipulate statistics, so you do want to make sure it comes from a reputable source. But definitely walk into the conversation not hoping to change your mind, because if you walk in with that hope that you're going to change your mind, you're going to fight. And at the end of the day, that doesn't get people to sway. And so definitely walk in more prepared with the facts and prepared to deliver the facts. Sometimes people don't want to hear the facts, but they don't change just because you don't like them. Oh, also lean into your discomfort, because it's not comfortable telling someone that you love, hey, your thought process is not necessarily in line with my morals. And so prepare to be uncomfortable. Lean into that discomfort though, because if that conversation wasn't important, you would be having it.
And I'll just share. I think it's important to listen. That's what democracy is about. It's not having one person or everyone believe the same way as another. I mean, that's the real issue around trust, is that I tell you my truth, and instead of listening, you want to tell me why I should ignore my truth. And so I think what's really important is, especially for people you're close to or loved ones, there's a story behind the way they believe the way they believe. And then you have a discussion around why you believe what you believe, not what everything else is talking about, not just the stats, not just the opinions of others, but from a very personal perspective of why you have that. And if your truth is that connection, then let it continue to drive the conversation. I mean, when we look at our founding documents, looking at them, just on base of words, not the history of it, not what it's done to many people, including people who look like me. But if you look at the actual documents, it is what helps shape us to actually believe and trust in democracy. It's what people do to it that change it. And I think it's really important to be open to the differences. They are difficult, I agree. Lean into that, that uncomfortableness, but also fully listen, and where that comes from, where that opinion comes from, where that feeling comes from, where that thought comes from, and see if there is any alignment, but don't spend so much time trying to get an individual to get on your side, because there's probably about 5 or 7, 10, 20 others who will be right there with you if you spent that energy and time talking to them as well. And so I think it's really important to understand that, in this country, democracy is about disagreement. But that's why you have a right to voice your thoughts and your concerns, but you also have a right to be informed and to get the information. But it's about listening and hearing those stories of where people come from first.
You guys kind of said it all. All I have to say is, really listening to people. I usually, in my close personal relationships, don't tend to bring up politics, because everyone in my life knows that I know lots of politics. So if someone wants to talk about it, they'll come to me. And I really try to listen to them and just give them the facts, because it's not about trying to particularly sway someone to what I believe is moral and right, but more about just giving them all of the tools that they need to make their own decision.
Okay, we are about to begin the audience Q&A. For our live stream audience or those just joining us, I'm Frank Lewis, Associate Editor at Signal Cleveland, and moderator for today's forum. Joining me on stage are Kalila Worley-Billy, Senior Organizer for Greater Cleveland Congregations, Leek Gates, Senior Strategist for Cleveland Votes, and Lily Ferguson, Communications and Research Associate at Innovation Ohio. If you are here with us in person, you can line up next to the microphone to my left to ask your question. If you are joining us virtually or prefer to text in your question, you can text it to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. City Club staff will try to work them in. A reminder to keep your questions short and to the point so we can get as many as possible. And can we have the first question, please?
Thank you for this conversation today. It's really terrific. I want to address my question to Leek Gates. Cleveland is a city of many artists and arts organizations. Can you talk about your organization, how you're engaging the creative community, including those who may be reluctant to get back into the voters' booth?
Yeah, so I definitely talked a little bit about our creative activism initiative earlier. And so we not only are doing the creative activism, but we're actively in something called the Cultural Week of Action. And so back in last year, late fall, a national organization, Race Forward, actually listed an RFP. We were one of 14 organizations that was chosen. And so from last Friday, September 27th, to Saturday the 5th, we're doing something called Rally for the Culture. And a big part of it is having a diverse set of events. So we're engaging the arts again by being creative. So last Friday, Assembly for Cleveland is actually one of our partners. They had a public officials breakfast where some of our participants went and were able to meet the mayor. We participated in an intergenerational lunch at Thursday's Action Lab, where we talked about engaging voters and also health equity, which is deeply, deeply important. We had a event Saturday, literally we had an event every single day. The Saturday's event was really awesome. Councilman Blaine Griffin was actually out trying to register 1,000 Black men to vote, and Cleveland Votes was out trying to also do voter registration with our Power Fest. And so these are just some of the ways that we're not only trying to engage residents, but these are people that we typically might not see. You know, being in the MLK Mount Pleasant neighborhood, having people walk over and be like, who's Cleveland Votes? I've never heard of Cleveland Votes. I want a shirt. Where do you get that? And it starts a conversation. I got a few voter registrations because I just asked a simple question. When's the last time you checked your registration? I don't ask if you registered to vote. I say, when's the last time you checked? Because gerrymandering is real. Public location shifts are real. Not knowing deadlines are real. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm registered. It doesn't hurt to fill out another one, it's free. And so we've been utilizing the arts scene as a way to help promote that messaging. And also thinking about an upcoming issue, our tax levy that's happening, the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is another way that we've been having conversations. Thanks for your question.
Hello, I have worked for the Board of Elections from anywhere from a 4-hour shift to almost 6 weeks. It's good temporary employment. Certain companies have public service days or whatever you call it, and that's a good way. I would like to ask the people on the panel and the people in the audience to raise their hands. How many people have worked for the Board of Elections within the past year or as a certified observer for the Board of Elections? In the past year? In the past year. Why? In the past, yeah. Also, I would like the panel to comment on the laws in Ohio. I can remember when I needed a reason to vote absentee. And we have compared and also compared to the Ohio laws versus the other laws. Certain states, if you want to vote in a partisan primary, you have to declare your party 30, 60, 90 days ahead. Ohio is, I went ballot A. It doesn't matter if you voted for Party B in the last election. At one time you had to sign a form, S10, stating that you believed with the ideals of the party. I would like to really hear you compare the Ohio laws to other states, including the right that I think about 15 states have, citizens initiative. Thank you.
We did not, so Innovation Ohio did not do an analysis in terms of the partisanship piece. So I can't really speak much to that part.
I mean, there's a lot of laws and issues that have came up specifically over the last 2 years. And so I highly just encourage people to take a look at ACLU's website. They do a great job of kind of analyzing them. Another website that I often tell people to look at is Ballotpedia. Is one of our favorites at Cleveland Votes. And since I'm here, I'm going to shout us out. Cleveland Votes actually has a voter resource page. And so if you have questions about what's coming up on the ballot, but also if you just want to see where your voter, if you want to get registered to vote, if you want to create a sample ballot, just check out the Cleveland Votes website.
And I would also say the Board of Elections Cuyahoga County website is really effective and thorough. And although I haven't worked with the Board of Elections in the past year, I know in 2020 when the Board of Elections Cuyahoga County had one of its largest vote by mail rejection rates, we worked with and partnered with the Board of Elections at 280 volunteers. Look at over 13,000 vote by mail rejections and help the Board of Elections secure over 7,000 of those rejections because it was the largest vote by mail application process they had because of the pandemic. And so I think it's also really important to find out ways that you as a civic volunteer leader can work alongside with the Board of Elections. On election day, we will have over 50 volunteers at over 30 polling locations across the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County to ensure there is no voter intimidation, no poll worker intimidation. And so there are various ways to work alongside with the Board of Elections. And I do think that it is really important that you can do that as a volunteer or as a observer or as a paid employee, because what you can actually do is make a real big impact, learn the system, and then also too, just let them know if you want to coordinate anything like rolls to the polls, call, someone from the Board of Elections, let them know we're going to have a large group. We want to make sure that you have enough staff in place to support that effort. And so I think it's really important to continue to be informed and updated around ways we can make an impact as volunteers as well as paid staff with the Board of Elections here in Cuyahoga County.
Hello, my name is Cora. My birthday is 8 days after the election, so what can I do to help?
That's a great question. If you're not, you do have to be 18 before or on election day. So November 5th, 2024, you do need to be 18 before or on it. So unfortunately, you would not be able to vote in this election.
For clarification, it's a 2032 election. She'll be turning. She'll be turning 18 days after the 2032 election.
So unfortunately, you won't be able to participate that year in 2032. But you can still register right after the election. You can still register. So then for the primary, because we don't just vote in our general election, we also vote in our primary special elections. We show up anytime there's an election. And so you can register 8 days after when you turn 18. You can fill out a registration form and it will apply towards next year.
I would also say, we work with youth ages 8 and up. If that is something you are interested in, making sure you connect with a trusted organization that have, programs or support for people your age. There has never been a movement in this country without young adults and youth being a part of it. And so you don't have to wait. You have a lot of power and saying, I want to be a part of this democracy. You are a resident, you are here, and connecting with someone who wants to hear that and shape that and act on that. You can join tomorrow if you like and talk to other people around that. You can talk to your neighbors. You can talk to your classmates around what's happening. You can go with your parents or siblings or guardians inside the polling location and actually go with them to vote. And you can get a sample, like a mock ballot yourself to see what that process is like. And so I would say you don't have to wait until 8 days after the election. You are able to do things right now.
Yeah, and it was mentioned before that you can be as young as 16 to be a poll worker. So that's definitely something that you could start doing when you're 16 before you turn 18, 8 days after the election. But also, just talking with your friends, making sure that they're aware of everything that's going on, because, a lot of your friends might be turning 18 around that time. And as mentioned before, a lot of young people don't sometimes feel like voting is for them. So you could definitely communicate with them and try to make a difference in that way. You could volunteer with a campaign that matters to you, that kind of thing.
All right, we actually have a text question that I'm going to read into the record here. Can someone provide an overview of the Harvard study that is referenced in the description of tonight's forum? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Okay, so I assume this was a case study that was written for the Harvard Kennedy School. It was an overview of work done by Ohio Organizing Collaborative. A large part of it had to do with the challenges that we've discussed tonight with the voter rolls the voter files that are flawed. And then it also provided a lot of history about how we got to this point of so many voters being forgotten and left behind. An element of that was the history of campaigning over the last 15 or so years. It was one of the lessons that the Democratic Party took away from the 2008 election, Barack Obama's success. And this is the authors of the study. I'm not making this. This isn't me talking. This is quoting the authors of the study. One of the lessons that the Democratic Party took away from that is that they can have an enormous amount of success with sophisticated data, use of data and technology. And that led to an emphasis on high propensity voters. We want to get the most bang for our buck. Of course, campaign dollars are scarce in most races. Especially when you're talking about running at the local and the state level, they don't have infinite resources to draw on. They need 50 votes plus one. And so they're focusing on the high propensity voters. And that's why in some places, like where I live in Cleveland Heights, I'll have people come into my door several times over the few weeks before an election. And there are whole neighborhoods, as the folks here could talk about, in Cleveland and parts of some of the inner ring suburbs where no one ever goes. So that was one of the elements that was part of that study. You can read about this in the article I wrote for Signal that was published a couple of days ago. The headline was "Invisibilized," which is a word I borrowed from another researcher whose work I quoted in the article.
All right, I got another text question, which I think almost dovetails off what you're talking about. It says, one of the biggest complaints we hear from East Side voters is only being engaged during election time. Do you see the low propensity scores further depress those scores? And if so, is there hope to reverse this vicious cycle?
Sure, I think that was part of the reason why when we created our Battle for Democracy campaign, in which our neighborhood captains and voter virginity fall under, we knew we had to commit to it being long-term in every election, both primary and general, because people are right. If you look at what would happen even around national elections, there would be this huge pour into Ohio, and then there wouldn't be any follow-up. There would not be any connections around what's happening locally. And so it was really important for us not only to have conversations with voters, to think about what are the local issues that we want to target local elected officials to act on, but also create that voter guide every election, and then follow up with that same list of people every year to combat that. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it's really important because people oftentimes feel exploited. They feel as though they're only needed to move on an elected official or to move on one particular dynamic, but not invested in. And so having a long-term strategy is a way for us to think about how do we invest in the communities. All of the communities and wards that we're in, we also have GCC member institutions in them. Some of them, like Shiloh Baptist Church, is 175 years old inside of Central Ward 5. That, that institution is inside of that neighborhood. And so when we're going out, we're canvassing from that institution to show individuals that if you do not see us, you can always talk to Reverend Dr. Lisa Liz, who's also the chair of our Battle for Democracy campaign. So it is around how do you continue to build upon and invest, and not just look at it as a one election fix. Because they're absolutely right. We've seen it. We're Ohioans. We see now the divestment because we're not, quote unquote, a swing state. But if you look at investment, we'll see that we are a state that has more voters not voting that's determining who we are than the ones that are. And so it's really important to invest in them for the long term and every election, not just every 4 years.
At Cleveland Votes, we believe that democracy is more than elections, because it is. And we're a year-round organization, which oftentimes people think that we are only present during the election cycle. That's not true. And it's also a lot of other organizations like us that do the civic engagement work, because the idea of civic engagement is to create equity for all. And so when we're thinking about like what Khalila said, how we're engaging people who only feel that they're seen during election cycles, I try to combat it with saying, okay, I get it. It's a presidential election year. Everyone is out. Everyone is doing things. Everyone's door knocking. But what happens in those off years? And so, last year was an off year. It wasn't a presidential election year, but there was a lot of canvassing and a lot of door knocking to happen at multiple points throughout that year. Next year is a mayoral race. You know, if you don't live in the city of Cleveland, still you know people that live in the city of Cleveland, and there's also a major city council race that's happening too. And so thinking about how we engage people not just only on presidential election years, but also the quote unquote off years is really important. And it's really up to like our local publications like Signal and places like the City Club for us to be able to talk about democracy. There's a very Ohio-based term that a lot of our city colleagues use. It's called democracy building. Nobody really in the United States says that, but Ohio. And the reason why Ohio says it is because we're full of democracy building organizations. Literally, in most of the major counties, there are tons of democracy building organizations doing work. And so it's not just that we're not doing it or you don't see us, we're not talked about. And so really encouraging, again, I'm just gonna call you out again, Frank, really encouraging Signal to make sure that they're talking about democracy around, just like we're doing the work. You know, it's just reflective as the people that actively consume the media. It's reflective in the work that we do if you showcase and highlight it.
And I also think it's important, I'll just add this also caveat, that what we're hearing, we also connected to the ongoing work. I mean, when we heard about youth bindovers and the impact that it was having on African-American boys being bounded over to the adult system, we heard that as we were going door knocking, but we made that a long thread of our campaign work and created the youth bindover team. They went to observe trials and we lifted that up in the primary for the county prosecutor's race. It helped to propel the conversation around bindovers. It was the same around our Cleveland neighborhoods now with the mayoral race in 2021, where we looked and saw, you know, some of the divestment that was happening in many of our Cleveland neighborhoods that helped us continue to build on the neighborhood campaign. And then we had Cleveland Neighborhood Next. It's not just about what they needed and needed to win now, but what's the next thing. So I think it's really important for voters that if you're going to combat that depression, you also have to show action. Can't just be a lot of talk. If we don't make that voter guide become a realistic document for how we guide our work and the issues we combat with those same residents and leaders that know they want to have some trust in someone, then we will do ourselves a disservice as an organization. And I think that's what's really important, was help shape and compel us to continue to do our work strongly, as well as fight for real change in a way that is creative and innovative.
We only have a few minutes left, and so can we let you help you with this, and also Lily? We're going to talk about how you can get activated. I think it's really important for everybody here to leave with a voting plan or an idea of how to create a voting plan. And so I'm going to toss out some dates for you. If you have pen and paper, I get it. If you want to use a happy dog, I'm sorry, y'all. Don't want to use a happy dog or your sheet and pencil, please go ahead and do it. So Kalila and Lily both mentioned on Monday, October 7th, that is the last day you can register to vote. If you are choosing to register to vote by mail, your postage has to be postmarked by mail by October 7th. October 8th through November 3rd, that is early voting. And in Cuyahoga County, you can only vote early by using an absentee ballot, which must have postage stamps now, because our lovely Secretary of State removed free postage. I like to say the 3-stamp rule. And so, you know, 2 is fine, but just 3. Just put 3 on there, just in case, so it doesn't get sent back. Or you can go to the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. And so October 8th through November 3rd, we no longer have that Monday before election. That was something else that came through. I was going for private, so you do have around 30 days to do so. If you want to register to vote by mail, you want to give them the information on how to obtain absentee ballot?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's really, you can go online. You can also, many people who are registering people to vote also have vote by mail applications handy. And it's really important to put the mandatory information, like your name, your address, your birth date. Many of those errors that we saw around vote by mail applications was date of birth errors. So making sure that you do that. You can also obtain them at places like your local libraries. You can print them online if you're able to do so. But if not, if you're also looking for some vote by mail applications, you can also reach out to Greater Cleveland congregations. We have some available, and I'm sure many Cleveland Votes has some available in any organization that is working on voter engagement work. To have those vote by mail applications. You have to have the application first, set it in, and then the ballot. And you want to make sure to get that application in, because you know we're in the postal cycle that's delayed at times. So you want to make sure to get it done and get it done early, even though we have time to do it. You want to make sure that you're able to depend on the Postal Service being able to get you your ballot on time, and for your ballot to get to the Board of Elections if you choose to mail it. You can also drop it off at the Board of Elections as well.
And if you decide that you want to go vote early, highly suggest that you check the Board of Elections website, because week by week the hours there and we're still open. And so if you do not want to go there and the doors are locked, and you are not able to cast your vote, so please check the Board of Elections website. And lastly, I know I brought this up again, but the sample ballot is super important. There is multiple tax levies, there are, senators that we're thinking about, we have Supreme Court justice that's on the ballot. Just knowing all the information that's possible when you walk into the polls makes you feel more confident. You feel better because you're informed and you have tools. I think that might be.
I would like to add, if you want to find a sample ballot, Innovation Ohio actually has a nonpartisan voter guide, ohiovoterguide.org. You can check your registration. You can put together a sample ballot. You can read all about pretty much we have every candidate input, and we have bios and endorsements of most of the bigger nationwide and statewide candidates. That's ohiovoterguide.org.
And then you can also follow us at Cleveland Votes. We have a voter resource page for my colleague, and I think we shout out Innovation Ohio on there. Please follow us at Cleveland Votes. Again, we're out here just a nonpartisan democracy collective trying to change the world one vote at a time.
Yeah, so you can follow us at greaterclevelandcongregations.org or votervirginity.com to learn more, and all of the resources and tools around the voting experiences on both greaterclevelandcongregations.org or gcc-ohio.org and votervirginity.com.
Thanks, y'all.
Karina, Lily, Lee, thank you so much for joining us at the Happy Dog. Forums like this one are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech and make a donation today at cityclub.org. Today's forum is also part of the City Club in the Community series sponsored by Bank of America. Be sure to drop by the Happy Dog the first Wednesday of the month throughout the winter for more conversations just like this one. On Wednesday, November 6th, the Happy Dog will be taking on the results of the presidential election, if they are decided at that point. Then on December 4th, we will hear all about what we should do with Burke Lakefront Airport, perhaps even more controversial. You can learn more about these forums and others at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you, members and friends of the City Club, both here and streaming live. I'm Frank Lewis, and this forum is now adjourned.